All right. So thanks everybody for joining. And now I don't want to look at this transcript the whole time, so I'm going to just close that. Thanks for joining today. My understanding of the request here was more or less to highlight differences between Prince George workflow with regards to transfusions, between Prince George and BC Cancer Vancouver. And so that's what I'm going to endeavor to do. I want everyone to just go ahead and interrupt me as I'm going through, ask your questions. Of course, there are no dumb questions. It's possible there are things that haven't been considered that if we identify those today, that's much better than it happening after June the 26th. So we'll just dive into it. So first of all, I just kind of want to verbally tell you all what the kind of high level differences are. And then I'll do a little bit of demo in the system. I did not prepare a PowerPoint for today. I'm doing it pretty sort of, what do you say, relaxed kind of approach. So again, like I say, to just interrupt me, ask your questions, whatever we want to chat about as we go through. Sound good?
Yep.
All right.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you. So first of all, just want to highlight that at Prince George, they will administer 3 different types of transfusions. They will administer red blood cells, platelets, and albumin. Albumin is quite a rare thing for them to be administering in the outpatient MDC, but they do at times, I think very occasionally, order it. So just, by purpose of demonstration, you can see first of all that looking at power chart for the PG locations, all of these like IVIG, fibrinogen, factor replacements, all of those would not be available on the PG location. For kicks, I can just try to order one of these. Of course, I logged into the nurse position, but that's okay. And it should say not available at this site, which of course it doesn't. So first thing I'm lying to you about, but it really shouldn't be available here. I'm hoping that in the live prod domain, this will not be available. We do have a list that's been checked over quite a few times now to know which transfusion medicine power plans should be available at Prince George. So there was a time where I would click on things and they would show right here in this top bar that it wasn't available at this site. So forget that one about this, but just to note that only platelets, red blood cells, and very rarely albumin will be given at Prince George. Another thing to just kind of note is that the group and screen requisition that comes out of CST Cerner has been approved by UHNBC for use. And so if the group and screen requisition is printed from CST Cerner and brought over to UHNBC for the lab to collect the blood for group and screen, it will be honored at UHNBC. That was one of the questions that we had to work with UHNBC to ensure that they would accept that requisition. And another kind of big point of difference for Prince George is the identification of patients. So do not try to use the MRN here generated and use that to identify your patient. I'm just trying to show here. So what you see now on the screen is just a screenshot of the green tags that they have coming from UHNBC, and it does contain an MRN, but this MRN is generated by the Northern Health version of Cerner, and so it will not match our CST Cerner MRNs. So just make note of that in your minds. If anyone's trying to match the blood product with the patient and they say, well, it doesn't match, make sure you remind them that they are only to use the PHN, the birth date, and the name of the patient as the identifiers to check that the blood is assigned or allocated to the right patient.
Erin, it's Tammy.
Yeah.
Hi, so Cerner labels aren't going to be used on these in any form?
So Cerner labels would be used still on the requisitions
Okay,
if there was a need to. Like, so if it comes from FormFast, obviously it doesn't need one, and the requisitions that are printed. But if there was a need to use Cerner labels, we would still use them. But when they go over, okay, so here's an example. If the blood is collected in the MDC, the nurses will use the Cerner label and place that on the blood product on the vial. But when it goes to UHNBC to be processed, they will relabel it with their own label.
okay,
And there again, they'll use PHN, date of birth, and name.
okay. Thank you.
Thanks for asking that. That's a perfect question. Um, Anything else? All right. So yeah, so that's about Cerner labels. Another thing that is going to be a little bit different is that nurses will be recording just the blood volume administered in CSG Cerner, as well as, of course, vital signs. They will record those in CSG Cerner, but they will not be able to, and this is kind of new to some actually, and you guys, CISs at Vancouver probably already know this, but there actually is no longer a location to enter the blood product number in CST Cerno. So I don't know when that change came about, but it did create a little bit of confusion when we were advocating to have the BC Cancer transfusion record uploaded into FormFast. So now I'm showing you the BC Cancer transfusion record, and this is what the nurses will be printing from FormFast and entering that blood product number, blood product type, etc. And then a copy of this will go back to UHNBC along with the green tags, and a copy of this will stay on the patient's chartlet. And it'll be uploaded, it'll be uploaded into CST Cerner as well. Does that piece make sense?
Yes, it's just him doing the scanning back?
Yes. Yeah, we
Okay,
are not doing single document scanning in the clinic.
okay.
Okay, so that is that with the transfusion records. Now I'm just gonna, while I'm on this screen, just show you guys a couple more things. So BC Cancer PG does have this outpatient transfusion reaction report form, which to note, this is not in FormFast. They would print this from wherever they get it from now. Maybe it's on the H drive, I'm going to assume. So that is not in FormFast, as well as this notification of blood and or blood product transfusion, not in FormFast. They'll continue to print that from their current location.
I believe that's from shop.
This comes from shop, this one.
Yes, I believe they're both from shop.
Okay, cool, cool. That's awesome. And then just the transfusion reaction. So if there were to be a transfusion reaction, the nurses will grab this transfusion reaction report form again from wherever it is currently located. We were not able to get the UHNBC specific transfusion reaction report form into FormFast because there's already a not identical, but possibly sufficient transfusion reaction report form in FormFast, which is owned by VGH. But at UHNBC, and I think even the nurses and physician or providers would prefer to continue to use their Northern Health version of the reaction report form for a few reasons. And one of those being that on the third page, it does have a quick reference guide to guide the providers on what orders to order and things like that. So this would be, if there was a reaction, this would be grabbed by the nurse, completed to the best of their ability, and returned with the product to UHNBC. And also on that note, if there was a transfusion reaction, the provider would not be ordering, there's a transfusion reaction module, which also should not be available here. Just trying to remember what it's called. I guess it would be this one. So this transfusion reaction module, again, should not be available on the PG location. So because that's concerning me a little bit, I'm just going to take a note of that to make sure it doesn't end up there. Should be virtual viewed off. But they're not using this transfusion reaction module for ordering labs or anything if there is a reaction, because there were things in here that somehow, and this is all lab speak that I don't necessarily quite understand, but there were things in here that didn't compute over to UHNBC lab. And so hence another reason why they would use their own transfusion reaction form instead of this module. And I'm sorry, I'm not explaining that super well, but hopefully you can kind of get the gist. So if the provider needs to actually add any blood work, if there's a reaction, they would add to phase and then add whichever blood work they needed. And they determine that blood work based on the transfusion reaction report form. So there's this, again, this algorithm on the last page that basically tells them what they need to order and what to do. All right. And there's one more thing. Oh, yes, ambulatory organizer and use of ambulatory organizer versus tracking shell. So we did build the tracking shell at Prince George to include the medical daycare, but nurses are going to be checking patients in and out using ambulatory organizer instead of tracking shell. They just determined yesterday that they don't want to adopt tracking shell at Prince George. And so you can see here that this is a MDC patient. I didn't set up specific patients today, but just wanted you guys to all have a visual of checking the patient in here on the ambulatory organizer. So all of these resources are available to the nurses to place their patients in, all of these chairs. And then you can also see there's an MDC IV check out. And so that's how the patients would be checked out at the end of their visit. And just of note that you only have the options for MDC locations here. And that's so that if we do the checkout here, as opposed to tracking shell, and this was one of the reasons they went with the decision they did. But they have to do the check in and check out here anyways, because if they do it incorrectly in tracking shell, there's a risk that they could inadvertently change that patient's encounter location. So we didn't want that happening. Any questions on that piece? Okay. All right, so I'm going to take this basically from the stance that, and the rest of this really is what would be expected to occur at Vancouver Centre as well. But I'm just going to do a really quick demo of initiating the transfusion. And so what's going to happen first is if it's a conditional let's say red blood cell transfusion in this case, which is what I have ordered, then the day prior to the patient's transfusion, the nurses go into the power plan and they look at this conditional order. And first of all, they're going to activate that conditional order. And this is essentially indicating that they're reviewing it. But what this also does is it sends the administer order to requisition manager and makes it available to print. And just for our reference, I do have, sorry, it's the order notification that gets sent to requisition manager. And I just want to show you the guys this a little bit bigger. So when that conditional order is activated, this order notification becomes available in Rec Manager. And this is what the nurses will print off to indicate how many units the patient is going to receive. So if it's a conditional red cell transfusion that states, you know, If hemoglobin less than 80, then administer 1 unit. If less than 70, administer 2. Then that's how they get that communication over to UHNBC to indicate how many units need to be allocated for this patient.
Erin, it's Tammy.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe I blanked or I missed part with my endless multitasking. Have you ordered the regimen or the power plan for this?
I had done it previously, yeah. So you
Have
didn't
you ordered?
blank at all.
No, did you order the regimen or the power plan?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I ordered the regimen.
Okay.
I've been making a habit of ordering the regimen. I heard that's what's more commonly done at Vancouver.
We have to order the regimen because if you
Okay.
order the power plan, you don't get a group in screen. I'm just looking here and I don't see the group in screen piece of this, which is, oh, there it is. Thank you. Oh, okay. So this is the new version, which actually isn't live yet.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so this is the new version, which is like the new and improved version where the everything is all in one phase and your group and screen is in an inappropriately named phase
Yeah,
called
next.
next cycle labs.
Mhm.
So we called this out in when it came to SIA and said this is not appropriate because this isn't a next cycle lab. These are actually labs for the current transfusion cycle. This is actually for now. So we please would like this relabeled. This was supposed to go live in February and it's
Mhm.
been hung up in varying JIRA activities. So the version that's actually in prod has a pre-treatment phase and then the transfusion phase. So that's why I was asking if you had ordered a regimen instead of a power plan because it just looks different than it does in prod. So the
Right.
FAQ that is on SharePoint and on our Confluence page does show the ordering sequence with this really funny pre-treatment phase that contains the group and screen. This version here, I have an FAQ written to support the new workflow and kind of stewing in the background, waiting for it to be fixed.
Okay.
So sorry to derail your demo, but this isn't what it's going to go live with.
Okay. Is that FAQ something that would be helpful for the provider adoption team to have?
Um, I think so. I can take a look. It calls out some stuff for Vancouver for MDC specific, so they might have to just make a few adjustments to make it PG relevant, but it
Mhm.
does very specifically call out the two different phases. It's a little tricky to order the two phases because you have to order one and then go back to the regimen level and order the second, which causes some errors with the providers and hence why this new version is wonderful to use.
Okay.
Um, so who shall I send this to? Max and Christy?
Yeah, I
The
would say
FAQ?
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. So sorry, I mean, other than the fact that the group and screen is in a different one, your transfusion phase is the same, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry to derail you.
Oh, not at all. No, it doesn't derail, it just adds.
Do you want me to CC
Because,
you with that on that
yeah,
as well?
that'd
Okay,
be
I can do
great.
that. I'll do it right now. Thanks, Erin.
That'd be great. Thank you. All right. So yeah, so Tammy pointed out a good point, and that is just if we order just the power plans, they don't come with the group and screen orders. And so, of course, nurses are going to be looking for that group and screen, as will the folks at Transfusion Medicine at UHNBC. It just kind of tweaked me. I'm sorry that I forgot to highlight. I just kind of took it for granted that everyone would know, but all transfusion products, blood products come from UHNBC, which is, of course, a separate health authority from CST Cerner. So apologies for not sort of highlighting that at the beginning of this presentation as well. So, just thinking now. So the nurse has now activated this conditional red cell order. And now what we're going to do is we're going to transcribe the details from this order into the appropriate administer order. Now, I'm sorry, I don't have much real estate on my screen, but I'm going to just open up the order information here. And we can see that this one is stating if hemoglobin less than 70, then transfuse 2 units. If hemoglobin is greater than or equal to 70 but less than 85, then transfuse 1 unit. So let's just say for the sake of this demonstration that this patient's hemoglobin is 82. And so we're going to be transfusing 1 unit. So I'm going to take that knowledge and I'm going to transfer it down into one of these order sentences. So it's going to be 1 unit IV over 120 to 180 minutes. And when I go to order that, then the ordering physician window shows. We do not have to select a co-signature because the provider has already written the order, and we're just confirming that the patient does qualify for that. And so we're going to say they're anemic and symptomatic, and then there should be no special requirements in this case. If the patient did require irradiated or saline washed, then that would be noted by the provider in the conditional order. Um, okay, so once the nurse has ordered that, then we can go ahead and select orders for signature and then sign and refresh. So now scrolling down here again, we can see that the administer red cell transfusion is now in a future state. And just to close the loop and indicate that the nurse has completed their check of the conditional red cell order, we're going to right click on this and select for complete. And then sign. So once the nurse has done all of that, there are steps also for the clerk to complete, and the clerk will be printing first of all the slate for transfusions for the next day or the schedule, and they'll be doing that from within their SHAP book. So I do have a slate already opened up here. I did a very wide range of dates so that we could just see a few different names and a list populate here. It would never be this long at Prince George. Um, Maybe a wild guess, they might have up to 3 transfusions in one day, I'll say. Those transfusions can be sort of urgent same day. They could also be planned or scheduled transfusions. So just so that you know that as well, there are those 2 kind of options. I think one of the things that we did realize with Prince George is that the staff are very generous and accommodating with their patients because their patients come from such a wide geographical area, which is why they will like go ahead and order blood and have it transfused on the same day. Um, yeah, so that is the report that the clerk would be printing. As you can see, none of these have any, they don't indicate the number of units of blood that are required, which is why we're also having the Prince George team will be printing out that order notification that I showed here, which shows the number of units, the special requirements, um, and if there were a hemoglobin, it would show that. So yeah, so this is what the clerk will be sending over along with the schedule for the next day. Is that all making sense? All right, going to close that now. And so now we're going to fast forward to the day of. The patient has come in and they're ready for their transfusion. And so the nurse simply needs to activate that day of treatment now. It looks like, what did I do? There we go. Okay, that's better. So now we can activate that day of treatment, orders for signature, and sign. If this were a same-day transfusion, then there will still be some verbal communication required, because if the physician is entering these orders in the clinic and the patient's going straight over to the medical daycare for the transfusion, then some communication needs to happen so that the clerks and the nurses know that the patient is coming. One of the questions that Prince George was concerned about was, does this need to be scheduled before the nurses can start transfusing? Well, no, it doesn't. They can start transfusing as long as the orders are there and available. And of course, as long as they have a group and screen that's current, then they can start transfusion. So I'm just looking at my notes here, and really that's going to be concluding our presentation. Oh, except that I didn't show you that the fact sheet, when we click on this, of course, it goes to the shop. But we also had the Prince George blood product procedure loaded here so that it's a quick link for them. They will continue to follow their local procedure, administration procedure, because of course with their interactions with UHNBC, it was important to keep that the same. Okay. Anybody have any questions while I think about if there's anything else I need to show you?
Erin, it's Kelly here.
Yeah.
Hey, earlier you showed that there's a paper form of the transfusion reaction record. There was two, if I'm not mistaken, that you showed. So there was this one, and there was the BC cancer one. What's the difference between those two? Or do we need to fill out both, or?
Okay, so this is the transfusion reaction report form. I wonder, were you thinking of this transfusion record? Or was it one of these other notifications? Because there wouldn't be, I don't, was this the form?
Sorry, I was muted. The third BC cancer form that you showed.
So this?
Yeah, this one, yeah.
Sorry, yes. So this one is if the patient has been like discharged home, feeling fine, no reaction while in clinic, then they need to report any reactions within the first 24 hours of the transfusion. Sorry, that wasn't clear at all, Kelly. I'm sorry. So this is what they're sent home with, just in case they do have a reaction after leaving the clinic.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
And so, yeah, for sure. So what they do if there is a reaction is they would be calling in person to the unit where you received blood. So they would go to the BC Cancer Center, and then the center would have to fax this to Transfusion Medicine to notify them. I'm not sure if there's any other actions that BC Cancer needs to take on this. It doesn't look like it. It's been a while since I've looked at this form, so. Yeah, it's really just if they have a reaction after going home. Thank you. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay. With that demonstration, everyone who needs to support nurses in MDC with a transfusion feels okay about it?
That was very thorough, Erin. Thank you very much.
Okay. Like I say, I tried to focus on the variances between Vancouver and Prince George, but did want to give just a little taste of what it does look like when they are administering the blood. I think from my personal experience with supporting nurses doing blood transfusions, what caught me off guard the first few times was the whole conditional red cell transfusion order and then the administer orders. It really confused me at first. I think now I've got it in that, you know, the conditional order is reviewed prior to ordering the blood product. So it's just, and then the nurse is actually able to order this administer order based on that conditional order. So I just think it was kind of a funny concept for me. Additionally, when we're used to seeing nurses activating and administering chemo, this is a bit counterintuitive because, as you saw, there were multiple steps with first activating just this conditional order and then completing it, and then doing the same with the administer order, except just ordering it. And then when they came in for their treatment, then we activated the whole day of treatment, which when it's chemo, of course, we just activate the whole day of treatment when the patient shows up. So it's a little bit different than chemo administration in that way. If there's no other questions, I'm going to start by stopping my sharing and turning my camera off. Thanks, everyone. Lucy, is there anything else planned for this meeting, or do we adjourn at this point?
I think Lucy stepped off the call.
Yeah. Lucy slipped off. Okay. We don't usually do anything else at this meeting, right, guys?
Everybody